It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast, to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into episode number 50, I want to let you guys know about a few things. First off, this is our last episode of season 1. When you guys see us next, it'll be a new and improved podcast. It's going to be season number 2, the second season of the Detroit Pistons that we are going to be following the team. And we are so excited to enter into this new era of Revved Up 906. It's very exciting. And also, we finally hit that episode number 50 mark. I remember when we started the podcast, we're like, oh, we can't wait till we get to episode 50. Like, we're going to be such professionals and have everything figured out. And here we are. And we're still getting there.
Yep, we are.
But we're happy to be here. So it's exciting to finally reach episode 50 and then season 2. So that's going to be exciting. So be on the lookout for season number 2. So make sure to like and subscribe so that you guys are along for the ride of what is going to be season 2. Also, I want to shout out Grind Clothing Co. They are our official merch sponsor, and we're probably going to be having new merch dropping during season 2. So you want to make sure to go check out their website and see all the designs they have for our podcast. You can find hats very similar to the one that I am wearing in this week's episode. So make sure to click the link in our YouTube bio or in the description below this video to get a quick straight link to their website. And so many fun designs, sweatshirts, bucket hats, not jackets, but t-shirts, all kinds of fun stuff. So make sure to go check it out. Polos too. And then also, I want to make sure you guys click the post notifications button. It looks like a bell on our YouTube profile. That is going to give you notifications when we are posting. And we are very soon going to be starting up Revved Up recaps again following every Detroit Pistons game. We're going to hop on Zoom and break down what went right and what went wrong. And we're going to talk about the statistics. And so make sure to turn on your post notifications so then you can tune in to every weekly episode and our Revved Up recaps. Also, we have Reels, so make sure to go check out our clips. If you're not able to watch our full-length episodes, go click on those Reels to stay in the know what's going on with us and the Detroit Pistons because our Reels are really fun to watch, so make sure to go check them out. A lot to cover this week, a lot going on, but let's get into episode number 50. Recently, Monty Williams said in an interview with the press that James Wiseman and Marvin Bagley are having a duel, a competition of who is going to take the backup center position. And this is a very interesting conversation because a lot of coaches don't usually come out and publicly say, like, these two guys are competing, the best man's going to win. It just doesn't happen that often anymore. And this is something that I wanted us to talk about because everybody kind of knows, if you watch the podcast and have been watching for a while, we're pretty big James Wiseman guys, and we really buy into his talent. But we also are pretty partial to Marvin Bagley. So this is going to be an interesting discussion today. But make sure to comment below what you guys think about this competition between James Wiseman and Marvin Bagley. We would love to know what you have to say. But Ryan, start us off for today's episode because I'm so interested to know what you have to say.
So I really think this is Monty trying to motivate these two guys, just in the sense of James, as an example, we've seen flashes, multiple flashes of times where it's like, okay, he's the best guy out there right now. This is getting scary. But there's also been times and moments where it's been like, James, what are you doing right now? But that's the lack of experience. And I think Monty publicly saying this is trying to initiate or motivate James Wiseman to like step his game up. Because like just going off of the preseason opener against Phoenix there, James Wiseman had 4 points, 7 rebounds, a steal, shot 50%, and 100% at the line. But like just having 4.7 rebounds and a steal is not going to cut it, dude.
Yeah.
It's not. And so far in this position battle, you would say Marvin Bagley hit the. If you wanted to make a good first impression on your new head coach, you certainly did that. 25 points, 7 rebounds, and assists, shot 71% from the field, 50% from 3, and 80% at the line. Marvin Bagley, have yourself a night.
Yeah.
There's not much more you can do other than that, than just work hard. And so based off of the preseason opener, I'd say Marvin is probably getting a little bit more eyes on him and probably is winning this right now. But I really think this is just Monty trying to motivate James to take that next step in his game.
Yeah, and this is going to be a knock on James and a positive for Bagley, not just with the preseason debuts, but the difference between the two, and they're very similar play style in a lot of ways, is Marvin Bagley is always making an impact. And I think it's an effort thing. Sometimes James Wiseman can play in a game and 6 minutes go by and he just didn't do too much. I want to see James Wiseman start putting a little bit more effort in just being motivated and doing the little things. Marvin Bagley, we know, likes to score, but he accompanies the scoring ability with doing the little things. And we see at times him get distracted and focus on scoring and then not do the little things. But Marvin Bagley is a little bit more consistent in boxing out and not fouling as much on the defensive end. And I think Marvin Bagley, like you said, I do agree. I think he has the edge right now. But I think James Wiseman's the kind of guy that we know he has the talent. Now just start putting it to work, James. You got guys around you that are talented, and you can exceed with these guys and succeed and have positive play. It just depends if he's going to run away with that. To kind of hone in on James Wiseman a little bit, we saw him last year average 10 points, 6 rebounds, 56% from the field in 45 games. One of the positives I see him and the difference between him and Bagley is being able to protect the rim. And we see Bagley struggle with the fouling and just not protect the paint well. But James Wiseman able to protect the paint. Is that going to be something James Wiseman has to hone in on if he wants to win this battle?
I mean, when you look at what James did in Summer League, it was a completely defensive show. James it was like block after block, and then he was getting to the right position on the court in the paint where you needed to be at all times. And to me, going into this season, I'm going like, yeah, he probably has that foot up and just he can easily defend anyone right there. But there is a little bit of a downside to him too, is he is fast, but he's so inexperienced that he's going to foul. He really is. When you have Bam Adebayo going at you in the paint, that's a tough matchup for anybody. When you have now Kristaps Porzingis in Boston, that's going to be a tough matchup for James, because when you have like the unicorn 7'2" on James Wiseman, is not small.
No.
But Kristaps is just more of an offensive-minded player, so he knows to get the right shot up and the right opportunity. When you have guys like Kyle Kuzma, who is a little bit of undersized for a big, but is still playing that position, he can easily go up against anybody. And so I think James is going to have a little bit of a challenge if you were to go up against top-tier players. But if you're going up against the guys on the bench, he may be fine.
Well, and the thing with James is he's at the point in his career where you want to eyeball his play style and have the feeling that the game's slowing down for him. And I don't think he's quite there yet. I don't know, he can hold his own against, certain premier centers in today's league. But then there's some guys like the top tier, like Joel Embiid, you mentioned Bam, where you can just see him not step up to the occasion and not be able to really be able to hold his own. So for me, what I want to see from James in these first 25 games per se is seeing the game slow down for him. I still think his mind's racing all over the place and not quite present yet. And I hope to see him progress in the positive direction in these first 25 games, because he's getting to the point where, he's dealing with injuries, but I mean, I believe he's coming into his 4th or 5th season. The game should be slowing down for him. So us as fans and as spectators and commentators, we want to kind of keep an eye on that and see where that is progressing. But one thing I do like about James is we see him work very well within an offense. He can set those screens and be effective in the pick and roll. We see him able to, he's not a black hole when he gets the ball in the paint. He's willing to spread the ball around and get that ball movement rolling. With Marvin Bagley, that's one of the negatives on him, is he can sometimes be that black hole. When you pass it in the paint, he's more than likely putting that shot up, where James Wiseman isn't going to necessarily force it. So that is one thing he has up on Bagley. But if Bagley keeps putting up the numbers we're seeing him put up in the preseason, he might just run away with it. What are your thoughts on the way James Wiseman works within an offense? And I personally see that working well with Cade. We just haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, like in the couple games that James Wiseman had with the Warriors last year before the trade with Curry and everybody out there, it was just one of those guys that you want to give the ball to. He worked very well in that offense and when he played. But then with the last 20 games with the Pistons there this past season, you saw him with a guy like Killian Hayes, who Killian Hayes is good in his own regard, but he's not Cade. But what you saw from Killian and Wiseman together, you can only imagine it's going to be so much better with Cade.
Right.
It's going to take a whole nother jump. When you have an elite player around you, that automatically makes you and everybody else around you better. That's just what it is. Like in Phoenix, everybody in Phoenix is going to be better with Devin Booker and a Kevin Durant around. That's just the bottom line. You go to the Oklahoma City Thunder when they had Chris Paul. That team shouldn't have made the playoffs, but Chris Paul is an elite player. They made the playoffs. When you have elite guys around you, that just elevates the whole team as a whole. And so Cade and Wiseman together, I would assume Wiseman is going to take a bigger jump than where he was at.
Right.
The only downside is we didn't really see a whole lot of tape between the two of them because Cade was out last year, of course. But then in Summer League, Wiseman was playing. Obviously, Cade was not going to play in Summer League. The only tape we've seen was that first preseason game, and there was not much tape to go off of. And realistically, that was a preseason game. You're not going 100% out there. So we won't really see anything of what could be until the season starts. But I would assume Cade watching Wiseman all throughout last year, studying the team, and then watching and training with him in preseason and training camp, and really going out to the nit and grit and practice to find out and develop this chemistry. I think Wiseman, and I would assume he takes that next step.
One thing that worries me about James Wiseman is fouling. And I know I talk about it a lot. We talked about it during the offseason about how the Pistons struggled with fouling. But really, what determines whether you're going to be on the court or not is fouling. And James Wiseman kind of has those James Harden-esque fouls where just it seems lazy fouls. Like you just don't want to move your feet, keep yourself in front of the guy, and then you're getting back down in the paint and you swipe a little hard and boom, a foul. The guy's going to the free throw line. James Wiseman has a little too many of those. And last season, we saw him average 3 fouls a game. And for me, it's hard to have quality minutes on the court when you're fouling. And we saw it happen with Marcus Sasser in the debut against this preseason against the Phoenix Suns. Marcus Sasser only played 14 minutes and he fouled out. That's something that Monty Williams is going to have to address with the team overall. And a guy like James Wiseman, okay, he is coming off the bench per se, getting 22 minutes off the bench, starter minutes, but just off the bench. If he's dealing with fouls in that first 6 minutes at the end of the first quarter, that's when you lose all that momentum.
Yep.
So for me, a big thing in today's NBA is not fouling, especially when you're protecting the paint. That's going to be a big part of this battle with Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman, is simply slowing the game down and being present when you're on defense and not having those lazy fouls. And for me, that's going to be a thing James Wiseman has to focus on. It's those little things.
Yeah, certainly. Like in those situations, you need to be the best you can be. You got to take the step up. Realistically, if you're going to foul hard, because that's the bad boy era of basketball right there. If you're going to foul hard. And so just that mindset, and Troy Weaver and Monty pretty much saying, hey, we're not Pistons until we defend. Like, everybody needs to take that next step up in that regard.
Let's focus in on Marvin Bagley real quick. So Marvin Bagley, we saw last year, averaged 12 points, 6.4 rebounds, 53% from the field. And this was very similar to James Wiseman, only 42 games. We saw James Wiseman have 45. So that's another thing these two guys need to prove, is at least play 70 games in a season. At least in an 82-game schedule, reach at least 70. Because if you don't reach that mark, it's a little iffy for me. Why are we paying these guys if they're only playing half of a season? And that goes for anybody, in my opinion. But one thing that I loved about Marvin Bagley, especially in this debut against the Phoenix Suns this preseason, was he can make an impact in late stretches of a game, and he proved that against the Suns. He was a huge factor on why the Pistons were able to force overtime. And a guy like Marvin Bagley, even though he might be the backup center, you can see him getting playing time in late stretches of a game. We know Beef Stew at the power forward position isn't the most dynamic scorer. That Marvin Bagley kind of has him in that category. And I could easily see him getting put in with Jalen Duren in the late stretches of games. And if Marvin Bagley keeps proving that he can make an impact in those last 5 minutes of a fourth quarter, I think that's going to make him that much more valuable in today's NBA. And a guy that can help force overtimes. I believe he had like 8 points in that last 6 minute stretch to get the lead down from 12 to within 4. And then we saw, or within 3, and then Asar Thompson hits that 3-pointer with 10 seconds left. That was a crucial time, and a guy that can rally a team like the Pistons, the way Marvin Bagley did, I mean, money can't buy something like that.
Yeah. The way I see it is Marvin Bagley, instant offense. James Wiseman, instant defense. That's the difference between the two. Which one do you want more? Yeah. And in Marvin Bagley, what he was able to do in this preseason opener, it is an eye-opener for everyone. It's just more of continuing where you left off. That's the greatest thing you can do, is you have a great end of a season, and then you start off the season as strong as you finished. That's a great start for you. And realistically, if you start like that more often than not, you're going to take that next step up. Mm-hmm. And if Marvin, honestly, has never had as great of a coach as Monty. When you go back to Sacramento, he had 3 different coaches in his time there. Yeah. And then with us so far, he's had Dwayne Casey, and I love Dwayne Casey. We love Dwayne Casey. He's by far, in our opinion, one of the better Pistons coaches of all time. Yeah. But Marvin has never had one really, really, really good coach. He really hasn't. He's had multiple different coaches in a couple dozen years. And so now that he's having an opportunity to have a great coach who is not only a former player, but also has won Coach of the Year, has made it deep into the playoffs, has made it to the championship. Yeah. That's something very, very good to have with Marvin Bagley, who Monty himself was at times instant offense and was at times instant defense. That's the kind of player he was. And so if he can instill the defensive aspect into Marvin Bagley's game, Marvin Bagley, we might see what we should have seen when he initially came into the league as a number 2 overall pick.
There's a point I want to make, and it's going to be hard to verbalize it, so bear with me, but here we go. So we watched so closely last season, and we would take note of all the stats, and we would do revved up recaps and talk about it for 20 minutes after every game. And to me, after my analysis, I look at, okay, between these two guys, where are they at when they're at their worst as far as making an impact in the game, and where are they at when they're at their best as far as statistics and impact? And for me, between Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman, we'll see games where James Wiseman, when he's at his worst, will have 6 points, 4 rebounds, and under 50% shooting. That's when he's at his worst and not making an impact in the game. Maybe a block here or there because he always racks those up. But then Marvin Bagley at his worst always reaches that 10-point mark. And then always has around 5 rebounds. So his worst games are still a little bit better than James Wiseman. But when it comes to when they're at their best, I think James Wiseman makes, when he is firing on all cylinders, present in the game, James Wiseman can put up 30 points and 15 rebounds and shoot 60% with 2 blocks and a steal. And then Marvin Bagley, we see him at his best, score 25 points and 7 rebounds, 71% from the field like he did against the Suns. That's him at his best. So it just depends on wherever that median is, whoever is in the middle of the spectrum of being at their worst and at their best. And right now, Marvin Bagley's proving to be the most in the middle. And even when he's at his worst, still be able to make an impact. Then when James Wiseman is struggling, he kind of goes to the wayside, kind of like what we saw Saddiq Bey do. He'd have really good games, and then, at his worst, he struggled to make an impact. So for me, that was a point that I wanted to make, was Marvin Bagley on any given night is more than likely going to make an impact with that whatever minutes he's given. Where if James Wiseman isn't given as many minutes, I can see him going to the wayside a little bit quicker than a Marvin Bagley. There's a question I wanted to ask you, and it can be answered so many different ways, but I wanted to give a possible of a thing that could happen. So the Pistons are wrapping up a first quarter. We always see the bench players come in with around 6 minutes left, 5 minutes left in the first quarter. Monte Morris is in the game. Alec Burks is in the game. I've almost said Tobias Harris. Joe Harris is in the game. Beef Stew and Bagley are all playing together on the court to wrap up the first quarter. How do you see them working together and matching up against other teams and their second units? Because I feel like Marvin Bagley, if he's your backup center, he's going to match up pretty well against other backup centers in today's NBA. I really like that second unit.
Yeah, when you go down to an experience side of things, obviously Bagley has been in the league for a hot second now. He's been a starting power forward for the Sacramento Kings for years. Coming to Detroit, he had his opportunities from time to time to have starts, and then come off the bench. Now he's in a situation where the Pistons are starting to tune into their rebuild a little bit more and restore. And so what you will see is Monte is not going to want some nobody lineup out there. He's going to want the guys that have the experience. And so when you get guys with experience, with Monte and Morris, with Alec Burks, and then having Bagley out there, that's a very, very valuable asset to have. Bagley in that situation, I think he could easily line up against most starting big men in the NBA today. The only downside to him is still, again, it's his defense. That's the only downside with that lineup. But if you're going instant offense, second unit, Marvin Bagley is your guy, 100%. Because there's a lot of big men out there that I don't think could actually guard him. And that's no disrespect to these other players, but that's just, it shows you how good offensively Marvin Bagley is. There's at times where he hits a fadeaway jumper and you're going like, Marvin, don't shoot that. Do not shoot that. And then he makes it. And it's like, okay, and you go ahead, take that shot. I'm not complaining if you make that. But then there's other moments where he forces it up, up, and then you're in a situation where instant fast break, going the other way. You don't have your big man present down into the paint because Bagley is not freaky fast, but he's not slow either. So he has to rush down there, and then he fouls. That's the situation at hand. We saw that a lot last year. I think we'll still see that this year, but it all depends on what Monty's scheme is going forward and how it really will impact Mark Bagley there. I think the scheme determines the outlook for a lot of our guys this year. Where we see Bagley struggle on defense, I think might improve because you have like Jock Landale last year for the Phoenix Suns, who on most teams would not get playing time. Realistically, I like you, but I don't think you'd get playing time in most situations.
Right.
But with Monty utilizes every guy. He doesn't go for just the first ballot Hall of Famer in Kevin Durant or a Chris Paul. He goes after like a Cameron Payne who really got a second chance because of Monty.
And then he got cut after he
left. And then you have guys like Jock Landale who really wouldn't have an opportunity with anybody else. But because Monty likes using everybody and sees something in him, you get used. And so Marvin Bagley going into this season, whatever Monty's scheme is, historically speaking, I think it's going to benefit Marvin Bagley, but I think it's going to benefit James Wiseman and everybody else on this team.
So we've talked a lot about the impact of these two guys and their scoring, and Marvin Bagley kind of has the upper hand in that category. But then to flip the coin and talk about defense, Marvin Bagley struggles to protect the paint at times. If James Wiseman is so good at defending, able to cut down on those fouls, does that give him an upper hand in this competition of being the backup center?
I think so. When you break down who James Wiseman is, and you look at all aspects of his game, he's one of the fastest big men in the league, for one.
Yeah.
His blocking average is pretty darn high. It could be higher, but the reason it isn't is he's barely stepped foot in the NBA. If he's had more experience, I'd say James Wiseman gets the automatic bit of a start. But the lack of experience is what's killing him. Because when you just break down every single aspect of his game, it's like you have a stud young player right in front of you who could be a DeAndre Ayton at best.
Yeah.
But in the situation of not having the experience, you're looking at James Wiseman as he is himself, a player that hasn't even scraped the surface into what he could be, but it's just, there's not much there. We're in the molding phase of James Wiseman, and that's what Monty's here for. But Marvin Bagley, you see a good, young, average player who could be, if he's playing at his supreme best, in averaging 25 points a game, which I don't see that happening realistically. But if he is, and then he's averaging like 7 boards a game, the Pistons are one of the higher end teams. Who knows, maybe a borderline all-star, but that's pushing it because realistically, I don't ever see that happening. No offense. But Marvin Bagley is experienced enough to know when to take the shot and not to take the shot at this point. And that in his overall game, minus his defense, because his defense is shaky at times, but his overall game is so much better than James Wiseman's overall game. And that's the sad thing, because when you look at the two different players, you're going, okay, James Wiseman automatically gets that bid. But if you're just going off of experience and what Monty's looking for strictly, I think Marvin Bagley gets that bid.
So with Monty starting Isaiah Stewart and then Jalen Duren together, he's kind of got that old school thought process of the 6'8", 6'9" power forward, and then the borderline 7-foot center. Is there a world where Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman are both power forward and center in the second unit? Because I think that's a possibility.
Honestly, I think it is. I think it is more so than you've seen like Isaiah Livers and James Wiseman together.
Right.
When you have the two, essentially when you have Marvin Bagley, who is instant offense, and James Wiseman, who's instant defense, why not combine the two? When you have somebody like Marvin Bagley who can step out of the paint and guard around the perimeter, but then you have Wiseman in the paint waiting to defend that shot on a layup, I don't see why you couldn't have that. It's just one of those things that I would be scared for most second units going out there and you having to either defend Marvin Bagley on a post fadeaway or having to take a shot right in front of James Wiseman. I don't see a world where a second unit wouldn't be scared of that.
I think if there's a time to try that out, Bagley and Wiseman alongside each other, it's time to do it in the preseason.
Yep.
Hopefully we get a couple looks at it this preseason, or at least where there's not like 2 or 3 minutes of overlap. They'll hopefully get like 10, 12 minutes, some actual legitimacy of time to kind of get a look at what would they be like in the second unit, because I don't think we should just count that off right away. I think that's something we should at least get a look at and see, Monty kind of gets to see that a little bit more in practice than we do. And so maybe he's already counted it out, but I would love to see that as a fan and as a guy that analyzes that. Thank you. That analyzes the Pistons so closely. I would love to kind of see that in game speed, but time will tell. That will do it for season number 1 and episode number 50. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to comment below your thoughts on the battle of backup center between James Wiseman and Jalen Duren. We would love to know your thoughts. And then make sure to be on the lookout for season 2 and all the new content that's going to be coming to you. And then also, now that the season is so close to being back, get ready for Revved Up recaps. I'm going to keep prepping you guys for that because we love bringing you guys the post-game content. So make sure to tune in and like and subscribe. We will see you guys in the next episode and season 2. Peace.